You ever played against a deck and went, wow, that was extremely stupid? Well, this is what this whole video is about. Sometimes when a deck is so powerful, in order for it to be fixed, they fundamentally have to change how a card works, or they have to nerf it into oblivion so the deck will no longer be able to see play in any shape or form. Sometimes a card is nerfed beyond just a singular card being strong, but in order to keep the metagame intact and for the game to be a lot less frustrating. The first card we're talking about here is Archivist Aliciana, because this card was nerfed because the developers did not want decks to have 50 cards in them. And this card actually wasn't the reason why the Control Warrior deck in Rise of Shadows was very powerful, but it was in order to add extra value so you could play the control game longer. And arguably, this is the deck that killed attrition style decks. What players would do is play a super heavy Control Warrior list and then play Archivist Aliciana when they had 0 cards in their deck, and then bounce the effect up either with a Useful Brewmaster or a Baleful Banker to get another 10 cards in their deck after they went back into fatigue. As you could probably imagine, games lasted way longer than expected, and I remember playing games that were near the hour mark. Archivist Aliciana was changed from 8 mana to 9 mana, so you could not pair Archivist Aliciana with a Youthful Brewmaster or a Baleful Banker in the same turn, and were taking a huge liability if you wanted to put them in your deck. Back in the day of Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, highlighter decks were at an all-time high, but no deck was better than Raza Priest. Raza Priest used Raza the Chained in order for their hero power to cost 0, and with the help of Shadow Reaper Anduin, you basically became a machine gun with your hero power. And with the help of Reno Jackson plus Kazakis, the amount of value, healing, board swings, basically this deck had everything in order for it to be an absolute powerhouse. It was able to run a bunch of low cost spells and in one turn could turbo you down with the help of Mind Blast and Prophet Velen. Due to how powerful the deck was at the time, Blizzard decided to change Raza from making your hero power cost 0 to 1, and obviously the deck was no longer as strong. Over in Wild, we saw a brand new interaction when the card Hysteria was announced in order to make an insane OTK that your opponent couldn't do anything about. This combo was based on getting Wretched Tiller, Death Speaker, Hysteria, and enough health on board that the Tiller could just keep attacking and kill your opponent. Because Wretched Tiller did 2 damage to the enemy hero and could not die with Death Speaker, this interaction just honestly broke Wild for a bit. Rather than nerfing Wretched Tiller, Blizzard decided to nerf Hysteria so you can only target enemy minions, which I think was a good idea in hindsight, but I kind of wish they just focused on Tiller because Hysteria was a really cool card. In Madness of the Darkmoon Faire, we saw a version of Evolved Shaman that was meta warping and was basically seen every single game you played because it was absolutely dominating the metagame. Bogspine Knuckles was released earlier in a different expansion, but did not see a lot of play until Madness of the Darkmoon Faire because we got Cage Match Custodian, which means drawing this card was a lot more likely. And because of how much more likely it was, we saw Bogspine Knuckles into probably 2 Dread Corsairs to just seal the game up very early on, and it led to one of the worst experiences in Hearthstone. Also, Madness at the Darkmoon Faire was released near the holiday break, which means that they didn't nerf this card for quite a while, and during Christmas, we had to play against Evolved Shaman. And this deck was so powerful that if you were not running 2 Kobold Sticky Fingers to swap tempo, you were at a huge disadvantage in almost every single game you played. Finally, after the holiday break, Blizzard decided to nerf Bogspine Knuckles by 1 attack, making it so that you couldn't play Dread Corsair on the exact same turn, which means that we were finally safe from Evolved Shaman. During when they announced the new core set, we saw that Dread Corsair was no longer going to be making the cut, which means it was no longer in standard. I wonder if Bogspine Knuckles was the reason for this. Back in the Witchwood, when Shutterwalk was first introduced, we saw this combo deck that featured Shutterwalk that basically sealed the deal once you played 1 Shutterwalk because it would bounce another Shutterwalk in your hand, and basically the combo was infinite. Due to this, we saw a huge change to the way animations worked, and we saw that for the first time ever, Blizzard was willing to actually speed up animations so players wouldn't have to sit around waiting for all these animations to resolve themselves. And the reason why this deck was so strong is that Shutterwalk copied all your battle cries, which means you had to play a Saronite Chain Gang and Grumble, and Shutterwalk would infinitely bounce itself back to your hand. Now, I want one of the few people that actually think Shudderwock was a really well-designed card. You could leave a comment making fun of me all you want, but I will actually make a video defending this card. Blizzard also agreed with me that Shudderwock was not the issue with this deck, but rather the fact that you can chain Shudderwock. So the way that Blizzard changed Saronite Chain Gang fundamentally changed the card forever. Rather than Saronite Chain Gang summoning a copy of itself, they changed the wording to summon a Saronite Chain Gang, which means no matter what you did with Shudderwock, it would just summon another Saronite Chain Gang. They've also done this with a new card in Fractured and Alterac Valley, which was the Iron Deep Trog. They made it so that it summons a copy of an Iron Deep Trog rather than itself. It feels like this mechanic might be a little bit too snowballing and scary, so I doubt we'll see this type of mechanic again unless it's a very specific thing. Now, back in Wild, we saw a deck that I don't think we'll ever see again, and that was the snipsnap OTK Warlock. Now, if you did not know what this combo was, the ability to have snipsnap in your hand while using a summoner portal plus one mech warper allowed for infinite snipsnaps to be played on a singular minion. The reason for this was because of the keyword echo, which allows you to play a card infinitely amount of times in a turn as long as you have the mana for it. But because snipsnap was costing 0, you could play as many as you possibly could in a singular turn. And as long as you had one mech on the board before you ended up doing the combo, your opponent was guaranteed to die no matter what that turn. And as you could probably imagine, playing against this deck was absolutely horrendous because you couldn't really do anything to stop it. After snipsnap was terrorizing Wild for a long period of time, Blizzard finally changed the way that Echo works so that cards can no longer cost less than 1, which means snipsnap Warlock was finally dead. I also want to mention in this video Patches the Pirate, because Patches the Pirate was in virtually every single deck when it was in Standard. They decided to nerf it so it no longer had charge so that every deck wouldn't play pirates. Sometimes a card is good in Standard and Wild, but is a much bigger problem in Wild, so they don't want to just completely nerf the card in Standard so it's unplayable. And apparently the technology is not there to just nerf it only in Wild and not Standard, but how do they fix this problem? Well, rather than just single-handedly nerfing the card very hard in Standard, they decide to just ban the card straight up in Wild. This has only happened a few times, but I'm only going to mention the 2 Warlock cards, which is Stealer of Souls and the Demon Seed. Both of these cards were significant issues in Wild because of the amount of mana cheat it would provide, and the amount of times you could hurt yourself while developing threats in Wild was disgusting with the Demon Seed. And they couldn't find a solution to nerf this card and Standard in Wild, so they straight up just banned them, which is probably a really good idea because sometimes a card is just extremely hard to balance in both formats. Speaking of Stealer of Souls, it was nerfed quite heavily because of D6 Warlock in Standard, and its ability to just destroy you with the Demon Seed extremely fast was a really big issue, so they nerfed it. Deca Lunacy was also nerfed by 2 mana because of what it could do at the start of Forged into Barrens due to the fact that the spell pool was so good for Mage, it was just, oh, disgusting. Anyways, that's gonna be it for me for this video. I hope you ended up liking it, and if you did, make sure you subscribe and like the video, and you look fantastic. I'll see you in the next one.